you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. It's an honor and a privilege, but I wouldn't be here if it weren't for God's grace, and this wonderful community, because this is not only where I became addicted to heroin, but Birmingham and Jefferson County is also the area in which I recovered. So I owe it to this city and to this county and to the people here, some of which are here today that I will mention later, that made it possible for me to do the things that I've done. And I guess the point of me being up here is I'm not a scientist, and what I've done can't necessarily be quantified into statistics, but I can give you a perspective on what it's like to become addicted to heroin in Jefferson County and then recover in Jefferson County. And I guess the first thing, the day that changed my life was February 20, 2012. I was going down the interstate towards Mississippi on a 80 miles an hour, rolled my truck 5 times after I nodded out behind the wheel high on heroin, and I was arrested for 2 felonies, possession of loratadine, possession of heroin. I had been shooting heroin for about 2 years at that time, and my life was in the toilet. I was frustrated, I was tormented, I was full of despair, I was ruining my own life, and I was ruining the lives of those around me. And I was just a menace. I was sick, I'd been stricken with this awful disease of addiction, and it turned out that I thought my life ended that day, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Those law enforcement officers at Alabama State Trooper, they saved my life. And it was in Marion County, Alabama, and I went to jail, and under my attorney's advice, he convinced my parents not to let me out, which was another great decision. I went door-to-door to treatment, and I entered treatments, this was the 4th time, and I was there for 3 months and had some success for 7 months. This was in 2012, and then in August I relapsed again, August of 2012, and I say that because earlier today it was discussed about how the most dangerous part of a heroin addict's life, when they're most vulnerable to fatal death, is after a period of abstinence. And I had used heroin, and that was the one and only time I overdosed. And fortunately, the person with me knew CPR, and he resuscitated me. I was blue, according to him, And so, I've been blessed, and I'm just really grateful to be here today. And it's awesome to see all you people here concerned and putting forth an effort to try and, make a proactive, move towards solving this epidemic. Because, also has been alluded to earlier today is that, I think one of the doctors from the BME talked about how, we don't, those what were likely oxycodone overdoses were counted as heart attacks. Well, drug addiction also contributes to, traffic fatalities, and it also contributes to suicide. I bet more people are dying of this disease of addiction than we see on paper. And so after I relapsed in August 2012, I, struggled with it, and it was also talked about earlier that, sometimes the withdrawal symptoms are so fierce that even someone who wants to quit cannot, and that was my case. I had to return to treatment one more time in December in order to beat it. And, what was important in that, and why I say that is because, and this has been mentioned earlier, is that addiction and heroin addiction, it is not a moral or character issue. Almost all the time, all the heroin addicts I've met know they're wonderful people. And they don't want to do the things that they do, but when you're on heroin, you are mentally compromised. Getting high is as important to you as eating. It's the same part of the brain. It manipulates you and it drives you, and it is just essential for survival as far as you understand it. And you will do anything it takes in order to get high. And, you become this selfish, maniacal monster. I think that's why it's so stigmatized, but it really is a disease for all intents and purposes. And another message I'm up here to tell you is that there is hope. Jefferson County, yes, we are having a major problem right now, but we can overcome this. I definitely believe in this community, and I think it can happen. I stand here as an example of why that's true. And another thing I'd like to mention, this pertains to law enforcement and it pertains to demand reduction strategies, is that, when prevention or law enforcement efforts work, it's invisible, meaning that we don't see it. Like when a kilogram is confiscated off the street, that's 1,000 grams, 10,000 tenths that won't kill someone in an overdose, or when a kid, gets involved in an after-school program and changes the course of his life that would have ultimately ended up into heroin addiction, and he goes on this other trajectory. You don't see that. You can't quantify that on a piece of paper. And so, there may be more. I know there are more success stories because I know some personally. There are some in this room right now. It is a very beatable thing, but we just have to understand that it is extremely dire. But when people succeed and overcome this, it is not often quantified, and therefore it seems very bleak when there is hope. And I guess another thing I want to talk about is that, people, due to Hollywood or whatever it is, they have this idea in their head that, a heroin addict is someone who's under a bridge, homeless, dirty, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, all these things. They're poor, they're underprivileged, and, sometimes that's true, but that's not always true. But even if that is true, I just want people to know, because this is true in my case, is that heroin addicts who are stricken are not lost. They can recover and they can become contributing members of society again. Again, I know a handful of these people personally. And my story of success, it's one of redemption. And again, if it weren't for the grace of God and the support of my family and community, it would not be possible. But since I've gotten sober in December 2012, I have returned to college. I have graduated with a BA in political science and philosophy from the University of Mississippi. Thank you. And I am starting law school at the University of Georgia this August. When I was living at this sober living environment in Bessemer, Alabama, known as ALR, Any Length Resources, it's a good place to send people after treatment in the Birmingham area. I was basically a college dropout, worked at a sandwich shop. I was this extreme liability. And there just wasn't a lot of hope. People didn't really see me. I was still facing these felonies in drug court. You just weren't going to look at me and say, well, maybe he's got a shot. I'd been written off because, I was a heroin addict. But that's not true. People, including myself and other heroin addicts, we can change and we can give back and we can become productive members of society once again. We are not lost, and it is worth the effort to help us recover. And just a couple more quick points, and then I'll turn it over because I realize we got behind after the last, discussion. But I think one thing that is important, and because I had to deal with this myself, asking for help, especially for males in modern American society, is seen as weakness. And I think this goes back to the idea that addiction and alcoholism too are deemed moral character issues, when this is not true. I wasn't afraid to ask for help. My family wasn't afraid to be vocal about, what was going on with me in order to let those around me, and my greater extended family to help and to understand that, I had a problem and that, I needed help. And so, I don't really know what this looked like in practice, but this idea that treatment is bad and that it's something that weak people do, and why can't you just buckle up your bootstraps and, just quit this bleep stuff, I remember my dad told me that one time, and he was just angry, but it's true. I mean, a lot of people have that perception. I realize a lot of people in this room are enlightened and they're forward thinkers, and they understand that that's not necessarily the way it is, but a lot of people out there in Jefferson County, in this conservative state, think that way. I'll just say one more thing, and, like I said, I forget who it was that said this earlier, but, I think it was the police chief. He talked about how this problem isn't isolated to one side of town. It's not on the west side. It's not on the east side. It's, Mountain Brook to Tarrant, Inslee to Vestavia, Hoover to West End. It's everywhere. And, it's stricken this whole community. It's going to take this whole community to turn it around. And this is a great start. And I do think it's going to take everyone, because it's a menace and it's new and it's a complicated problem to fix, because, when you're a 20-something-year-old, you automatically have all this freedom, but you have no idea what the hell you're doing. And, in today's culture, it's just, drugs are everywhere. And the threat is real, the struggle is real, but at the same time, redemption is possible. This problem is not insurmountable, victory can be achieved for Jefferson County. We can mitigate these deaths. I mean, I heard a statistic earlier that someone said that, you know, when law enforcement officers started carrying Narcan, that overdose deaths reduced by 70%. You know, I'm sure there are other measures that can be taken, but I just think, you know, this is a great start, and I'm very thankful to be here. I thank you all for your time, and thank you for listening to me and letting me speak.
My name is Danny Malloy. It's great to hear your story. You know, I am a former drug addict, so like the good doctor who just walked back in the room said, I took oxycodone and I locked it too. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, so you're going to have to deal with my accent. I'll deal with a couple things right away. I have seen the movie The Departed, and I don't know Mark Wahlberg personally. So those are the two first things. I'm just kidding, but I've been in Alabama for about 5 years. I'll fast forward just through my story. I'm here to share my story with you guys. It's really encouraging to sit in a room like this because, you know, I've been on the other side of the fence. I've been in the dope house. I've been on the streets. My mother and father got divorced when I was little. Dad was an alcoholic. My aunt took me, which is an ant to you guys, but I got news for you, an ant's a bug. So my aunt, which is my father's sister, took me. When I was about 5, due to his drinking, I didn't know my mother at all. And my father was just a raging alcoholic, and I got the typical, you know, you could have picked me out and said, he's going to be a drug addict. You know, I got in trouble in school. I had no dad in the house. I didn't know mom. I grew up with my cousin, who was an athlete. He was a year younger than me, and my other cousin. So we all grew up in the house like one big family, and I was raised by my aunt. She was like my mother, you know, but I always just felt like I didn't fit in, you know. I felt different. I always got in trouble. I went to Catholic school. This is right around the time when the nuns stopped hitting kids. I was getting hit, though, so I was like an exception. I'm kind of joking about that. I'd go home and tell my aunt, and she said, you probably deserved it, which I did. So very quickly, about an eighth, you know, fast forward, in 8th grade, I started smoking dope, smoking pot, and started messing with Xanax, stuff like that. You know, make a long story short, I've been to 20 rehabs, 5 psychiatric stays. I've been arrested for distribution of Oxycontin. Up in Boston, it's a little bit different. You know, up in Boston, you don't need money to go to a detox or a rehab. You're on welfare, so you just go in and out of the system. It's like a revolving door. So my whole life was just in one rehab, out of the other. You know, and I was messing with, you know, alcohol, Xanax, pot. I was like a glutton. I would do an 8-ball of cocaine. I mean, I was literally trying to die. But the one thing that changed everything was when Oxycontin hit the streets. I was part of the whole, you ever see the movie The Town, Charlestown? They were robbing the pharmacies for oxys. Well, I started selling oxys right around that time. So I was selling 100 Oxy 80s every 2 days. I mean, they were going like candy. Every one of my friends is either dead or has been to multiple rehabs, you know, due to Oxycontin, which quickly turned into heroin addiction because Oxycontin was $1 a pill. If you were selling them, you were getting them for 35, but still when you're doing 5 Oxy 80s a day, which I was doing, and I was crushing them up and sniffing them until someone came along and said, you know you can put that in a needle. And I was like, well, I'll never use a needle, you know. And of course I did, and it was a quicker high. It was easier. Make a long story short, 2004, I got arrested for distribution of Oxycontin. They set me up. I always make a joke. I say, I do a lot of public speaking, and I'm nervous right now, and I don't know if it's because I'm speaking or because DEA is everywhere. I mean, this could be a different situation, but if my friends could see me now. But at that point, when I got arrested, you would think I would change, but my head was just filled with just negativity. From the movies, from the music I was listening to, I was bombarded with this lifestyle that I was trying to reach for that I couldn't get. I got on a Greyhound bus, and I can't remember when, I think like 4 or 5 years ago. I left everything, and I came to the Foundry. I was a raging heroin addict. I brought enough heroin. I left Boston on Greyhound. I brought enough heroin for 2 weeks, what I thought. I did it all before I got to New York, and I showed up at the Foundry's doorstep, and Jackie Gann, who's here today, wave to Jackie, everyone. He was the intake guy who came out, and I literally broke down. He was like, we're here to help, you know. And, you know, that was the difference. That I believe was the key to my recovery. There was a person in front of me that said, I want to help you. It wasn't this big distant, oh, there's help out there. It was an actual person. You know, the Foundry took me in, and the one thing that was different for me that I had, all the rehabs I had ever been to, is I got on my knees and I asked God to change my life, and He did. That was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Graduated the Foundry, did good for a long time, and 2 years ago I got a phone call. Now, when I came down to Alabama, I always tell this part of my story because I left everything behind. My whole family up there is a mess. So I said, I need to just get away from here. I need to just do my own thing. I'm going to Alabama, you know. I'm sure they like Yankees down there, especially the ones that stay. So I get a phone call 2 years ago from my aunt that raised me. And I know I get an email. It just said, call me. And I'm thinking, well, she's probably mad that I haven't reached out to her in the 2 years I've been here, you know, because I was really doing good this time. I was really doing it. But all the other times I would tell her, I'm doing great. Yeah, of course. Let me in the house, steal her wallet, you know. And then that went on and on. So I'm going to try to get through this part fast because it's emotional. So I called her, and I couldn't hear her on the phone. I thought she said Michael died. And I said, you know, I thought she was talking about like a friend of the family. But she was talking about my cousin Michael that I grew up with, played basketball with. And I dropped the phone. For 2 weeks I couldn't eat. My wife, who I think she might have left, she had to go to work. Is she still here? No, she left. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't even be here. I guess Michael was shooting dope one night, shooting heroin, and overdosed. They dragged him out in the hallway because they didn't want to call the cops. And he overdosed and died, and they left him there just to die. So that destroyed my whole world. I mean, I made the strongest vodka you can make. I stuck my head out the window. It wasn't hard to find Loratabs. You know, I'm just being real. And I got on my knees again. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do what I'm doing. I don't want to live anymore. I mean, it just devastated me. So that's what brought me here. I'm with the Addiction Prevention Coalition today. Shortly after that, I got put in front of Sean Dorcheka, who just moderated the last board. Out of that whole experience, I said a prayer, and I said, what do you want me to do? And I'm not going to say I heard a voice, but I heard a voice that said, you're going to go tell the kids. So that's what we do today. That's where I work today. I work with the Addiction Prevention Coalition. We go into schools. We have chapters in schools. We work with kids about their choices. We don't necessarily go in and say, hey, don't do drugs, because when they came in and told me not to do drugs, it's like putting that big red button in front of someone and saying, don't push this button. I mean, it makes you want to do it. We're bent towards that, right? So what we do, and there's a time and place for everything, but what we do is we work with their choices, their character. We walk them through the process of what can really happen. If you really want to do drugs, this can really be the outcome. We also have a resource directory. We're trying to put all that together on our website. And we have the Birmingham Recovery Network, which is trying to put all providers together in a conversation and just get everyone talking, from faith to medical to everything, right? Because people get help everywhere. You know, there's not one way to do this thing. So today, with a couple speed bumps, I've been, you know, that's what I call it. I've been clean for about 5 years. And that's what we do. We help kids, you know. And if I can say anything, I'm looking at my phone because I tend to talk a lot. But I'm allowed to. I'm from Boston. So if I could say one thing that, me and my wife agree with, my wife had a good family. She had both parents in the house. They had money. They lived in Vestavia, and she has been arrested 17 times by the Vestavia Police Department. She was on meth. She was on meth for years. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. That whole thing left out a long time ago. Like my brother here was talking about the drug addict under the bridge. I mean, yeah, a couple of them might live under the bridge, but when I got on the Greyhound bus to come down here, I was working at Home Depot, and I was selling appliances with a needle in my pocket and a spoon, dressed like this, and I would sell a $20,000, set of appliances, a kitchen and everything, and then I'd go shoot dope in the bathroom. I mean, it's everywhere. It's not what it looks like. It's, what you think it looks like. And if I could speak to one thing, we have such there's corruption from within, I guess, in the entertainment industry, and we are killing our kids with this message that every girl's a stripper and every guy's a drug dealer, and this is what's cool, right? And then from the violent video games to all this stuff, and we fill them with this stuff and then expect them to be okay. And what it's churning out is drug addicts. I mean, last time I checked, there's a waiting list at every drug rehab. I mean, this is an epidemic, right? So what has changed in society from back in the day till now? Because it used to be, they're passing around a joint, they're drinking a beer. Now I'm talking to 17-year-olds who are like, we're sniffing heroin. I never even heard of heroin when I was in high school. I mean, but this is really what's happening. Now go turn on the radio, and you can hear it turn up. I mean, it's all over the place. They're telling these kids that we're giving them one message, don't do this. And then the Hollywood or the media is giving them this other message that says, no, this is exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take this medication. You're supposed to drink to have fun. You're supposed to go to strip clubs. I mean, there's a conflict here, right? And it's that conflict that if you ask my wife why she did meth, she has no other reason besides she was trying to have fun and follow all this music and stuff like that. So, I mean, the truth is we can recover, but also another deep truth is that prevention is possible. We can get in front of people and we can tell them the truth, which isn't necessarily popular, because it's going to take a community of people who aren't afraid to stand up in a room with everyone disagreeing with them and say, I don't care what you say, I don't care what you do, I'm going to stand against this. We're not doing this, not in my community, not today. So I just thank you for letting me share.